Welcome to the Changing Times, Changing Worlds Otherworldly show. We are bringing you topics and speakers, and sometimes nights like tonight when we're talking, we're recreating essentially panels where we have a discussion about a topic of interest to people who accept the fact that there is magic in the world. So tonight, for the difference, I'm going to be talking about, I want everybody to talk about, please pop in, that we're going to be talking about things that it is appropriate to be afraid of, or perhaps not afraid. There are people who, there are, anything occult is supposed to be scary according to modern
certain people.
Yeah, to some people, just the fact that it's occult makes it something you should be worried about. I completely understand that there is none of us out there who would be comfortable with a lot of telepaths as they're seen in fiction wandering around. We all have intrusive thoughts. If it stays in our head, we can just say, what a stupid where did that come from? And if it comes out your mouth, you can say, why did I say that? But you don't want somebody being able to go in there. And so I think that's why a lot of people are a little nervous about psychics. But that's not fear so much as the spooky stuff. Now, I wasn't able to get a hold of my friend who did ghost hunting, and he accompanied some other ghost hunters into a abandoned mental asylum.
Oh,
And okay,
target-rich environment.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think there's any excuse for going in there, except if you're filming and you want to get some good footage. And unfortunately, that is, I think that's probably what they were doing. At one point, he went because they all seemed like idiots, and he wanted to protect them. And so,
Perhaps the best reason I can think of.
I'll be there.
When they went down to the end where the violent patients were being kept, he found himself being picked up and thrown against a wall and held against the wall for a while before he was dropped. And he said, okay, I'm out of here. If you guys stay in here, that's on you. This is a dangerous place. Don't be here. And my perspective on that is that it's not unlike what was said in Stephen King's Kingdom Hospital series. There are ghosts out there who actually are insane, and that's why we're afraid of them. And let's follow my logic, and you can disagree with it if you want. But if you don't go into the light and you find yourself here in this world, and the world looks familiar to you, but nobody will talk to you, and you can't do anything. This is like a super extreme version of shunning. Shunning is psychologically very damaging. If you were going through that, even if you were normal, you might go crazy.
Yeah.
So
you might snap. You might snap.
Yeah, and gradually the disembodied who live on the other side do tend to, as in the movie Ghost, learn how to try to. Now, usually what dead people learn how to do is make the pictures on the wall crooked, make the lights flicker, send a butterfly over to sit on you or something. This is, but if you have someone who's insane, I don't care whether they're wearing a body or not, you should be careful with them. I don't think anyone who hasn't got good skills in dealing with people who are mentally ill should try and deal with a mentally ill dead person. But
Well, yeah, that makes sense from my context as a specialty trained home health aide who was trained in hospice and mental health. And one of my training focuses, how do you identify potentially dangerous clients or family? So I now can tell a psychopath from about 50 feet away. And that is kind of important because you don't know. And fear is something that's rooted in us millions of years ago. And sometimes we feel fear for no reason because our brains have been programmed to screw with programming. But sometimes it's reasonable to be afraid. And I kind of try to balance that against my own philosophy of respect all, fear none. But that does mean that if something makes me feel a little creeped out or afraid, I'll be very respectful of it and approach it very carefully. So, I don't know where we can go with that, but that's kind of my own personal approach.
okay, another thing that I would say that I think most of us have experienced the thing where you go into a room and you can feel the energy in that room. This is generally referred to as being empathic, because usually it's leftover energy from something that happened there a while ago that stuck to the ether, and therefore those who are sensitive can feel it. Is it dangerous? Well, if what you're feeling is the emanations from an entity that may be malicious and want to hurt you, yeah, could be. For in most cases, it's just leftover and it will eventually dissipate. And one of the good things that we can learn is various ways of dissipating negative energy. And a lot of people are very big on blessing it. Blessing is good. Just some of it you can get rid of with smudging, or I much prefer sound smudging. Ringing bells, shaking rattles. I like wind
Singing
chime,
bowls.
bells, singing bowls. I love singing bowls.
Oh, yeah.
And this, of course, will reminds me of there are many holidays where making a great deal of noise is part of the holiday because they're supposed to scare off evil spirits. Evil spirits apparently do not.
Japanese New Year, maybe?
Chinese, all of the Lunar New Year celebrations.
Yeah.
All of the Lunar New Year, they believe in making a gigantic racket. And if I were a demon, I'd leave.
Yep.
Yeah, I frankly, you put some music on and elevator music, and it might make anything go away. I don't know.
We need to try that.
But I think that there are probably, we may have better ways, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's something there that's going to hurt you. Now, another thing, what you see in movies a lot is ghosts. And ghosts, by and large, I would say the vast majority of dealing with ghosts is the type of ghost that is simply a psychic imprint, which is left on the fabric of the universe, and people pick it up. It's kind of like an old video recording of something that happened a while ago.
No actual consciousness, no actual free will, just a ever repeating image, like somebody has put many nickels into the old rotoscope machine.
Yeah.
Right. But there is no evidence then that this is a fragment of anybody's real soul.
No, it's just like a video recording.
Yeah.
But I have heard, I have read in some of the magazines and sites I go to that these have been disappearing. The ghost hunters from the Parapsychological Society have found them to start dropped off, like 80% of them in England went away after the cell towers went up, apparently. So
The EMAG soup.
it disrupts whatever those recordings are and frag them. So
Which is not necessarily a bad thing if you think about it.
Well, yeah, if it's actually clearing the area of potentially disruptive or malicious entities, that's a strange twist on it.
but that is not one of the things that would be dangerous, although it is something. Though if you see something that you're pretty sure isn't there, you might find scary. So if that happens, you might you might get scared. Let us not underestimate the damage that you can do to yourself by being scared and doing something stupid.
Oh, yeah.
Three quarters of the things that I think that you should be afraid of is the other people around you doing something stupid. But the other kind of ghost, there's there a lot of people can't tell the difference between what that type of ghost, the entity that actually is there, which is the kind that mediums usually talk about, which is your beloved dead coming back to keep an eye on you and help you sometimes.
Or your not so beloved dead coming back to continue tormenting you like they did in life.
Right.
Yeah. Luckily, there don't seem to be as many of those. There are very few examples of the huge volume of stories.
Well, I know this. I'm never going to the nursing home where my mother died, just in case.
Oh my goodness,
No.
nursing homes lead like asylums. They're just not a pleasant place to hang. But but the other kind that but then of course people do not seem to differentiate between almost any discorporate entity. And we're going to talk about a few of those. But I'd like to make the point that a poltergeist phenomenon can be dangerous. Most of the time we hear about somebody getting hurt in a haunting. It's not what I would call a haunting because it is a poltergeist phenomenon. Poltergeist is usually telekinetic manifestation when you have somebody going through puberty or another great crisis and it breaks through their blocks on their psychic ability and you get things like rocks appearing where items falling off the shelves, plates flying around, other things that can hurt you. But I would not want to okay, so
Yes.
Be back.
Yep.
No, she'll be back in a minute.
Yeah, I just thought, seeing we are talking about sound, I pulled out of one of my kits my itty bitty singing bowl.
Oh, nice.
That is tiny.
We lost you.
Yes, it is.
Oh, your bowl. That's a lovely bowl. Oh, there it
I
goes.
don't know if you can hear it over the.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Took a while to wind up, but
Yes, it does. But once it does, it runs up and down the chakra column like nobody's business, and
it vibrates everything.
it is really good for cleaning out a room of negative
Pulling
energy.
out ours.
And so if you can get yourself, if you have rooms that have negative energy, that would be a great tool to clear it.
Well,
And
what I like about it is, unlike the rest of the singing bowls in our communal collection, this thing is small and relatively portable.
Yes.
yay. I love
Well, I
portable.
dug ours out
Indeed.
complete with its Tibetan shawl.
Yeah.
And
But so just popping back into the subject.
Mine was
of-
turned out on a lathe somewhere, as I can see the little divot in the bottom where the centering unit went. But it came from a
Oh, nice. Can you play that one for us? Or
One of the
I
antique
can, yes. This is an actual hand-hammered Tibetan.
yeah, Kathy's got one of those.
wow,
That is a
sounds Tibetan.
beauty.
It's
Kat-
one of our treasures, and it never gets out of my sight.
Yeah, Kathy's got one that she bought. Wasn't quite gifted at Penzic, but damn close. That turned out to be a genuine made in Tibet bowl, as opposed to pretty much everything I own, which was turned out somewheres in northern India.
Right.
Well, if
This
you
one I
look
believe is
inside,
actually made in China, but you know.
the camera doesn't do justice to it, because if you look
Microphone, yeah.
inside of it, you see the hammer marks and you see the bright and dark spots from the inclusions in the bronze. And it's obviously a handwork. And the tone, if I get it wound up real good, it'll go for about 3 to 5 minutes until you can't hear it
Try
anymore.
sometime putting water in it and singing it.
Really?
Yeah.
Never thought of that.
It will change the tone, and it works very well on that.
Okay.
Well,
Start it.
And of course, if you get it going too hard, you're going to get a water spout.
yeah,
Let's
I
make
really,
water dance. Would you think that when you play crystal goblets, people play with their wine glasses, would that probably do it too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
course-
though,
Yeah,
then it
I've
would be
actually-
more.
I'm never able to, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't. I can't
that
do
one.
that.
I've actually seen somewhere a video of somebody doing that to a goblet of water, and you could see the circular ripples and then it's little up the middle
Yeah, that's
of droplets. I wouldn't quite call it a water spout, but obviously there was a standing wave that amplified.
Well, we've got
But-
one in the kitchen that is called a dragon bowl, and it's got
Oh,
two
yes.
handled. Yes, we've got one of those. The
Mm.
main problem with playing it is you get water all over the room.
oh yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Uh,
I had one for a while, and then put it into a auction some pagan pride day or something.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't using it enough, and I wanted to get it to somebody's hands. that
I
did.
figure when we're
Mm.
finally actually doing fairs and things again, it'll be sitting out in front of our tent on its own little table with a towel under it and
Yep.
another towel beside it, and people can play it.
Interaction, yes.
It's always wonderful, but anyway, so what if we can go back to poltergeist, because I would like to
Yes.
cover that
Yes.
again, as with somebody who is whether it's a person with a body or without a body, if they're mentally ill, the problem is the mental illness. And if you have poltergeist and you've got rocks falling out of a solid ceiling and plates flipping around, the traditional thing to do is to take the teenager and have them go visit a relative for a while. And sometimes the poltergeist activity shifts with them, and sometimes it just stops. This to me means that the family dynamic was bad for the person, for the psychic, and they needed to find another calm place where they could be happy. And I think if it follows them, probably the relatives they shipped them to were not being very nice to them either. But a lot of stress can do that. So if you're dealing with a poltergeist phenomenon, you probably ought to just look to the mental health of the people. Just say, yeah, people are psychic, deal with it. And right now we are psychic and upset. So let us find out what is making the person miserable, and they won't have to unintentionally throw rocks at people
That
or
works.
themselves. Oh,
I know from, once again, reading more than anything, that at the risk of being a little bit indiscreet, one of the best ways to deal with long-term person-centered poltergeists, especially if it's an adolescent, is get them laid. Especially if it's centered around a boy, that usually dissipates the energy.
Well, that is one energy that is easily overaccumulated
Mm-hmm.
and tends to cause people to do,
Stupid things.
yeah, pretty much. It's like, it's almost in the same category. Once I said, I like beer, but, while talking about beer, it's like it makes you holler and talk stupid.
Mm.
So it sounds like sex does the same thing. And it is such a fundamental, I think it's the fundamental human energy, because
Mhm.
without it, there would be no species. And
Yeah.
every species on the planet can make the same claim. And
Buried even deeper than our instinct to survive is our instinct to reproduce.
well, yeah, it's a reflection of the instinct to survive, because we see that as a way that no matter what happens to us individually, collectively we survive. And of course, now in the modern world where we think all these things don't matter anymore and nobody raises people to deal with these energies, I would say the percentage of horny goofs, as we used to call them, in the
Mhm.
world is probably a higher level than it's ever been.
Yeah.
Well, I still remember, though, something that Baroness Megan said, and this was back when they had the house, and they were talking about the sheep, and they were talking about the ram, and her summation of the existence of a ram: the brain is this big, the balls are this big. Which end do you think runs the ram? And that was a fundamental truth that I thought was absolutely great.
Mhm.
I would say that would depend on the time of year.
Well,
It's
given
kind
the
of like,
differentiation between the brain and the other end, I would think almost any time of year. But yeah, during the high
Okay.
season,
it's
I
rather
would
the same with deer.
mm,
In rutting season, male deer will do things that they obviously would not do once they've shed.
mhm.
All
well,
right.
somebody once pointed out our biggest problem is that we are in a perpetual state of low grade rut, and therefore
Mhm.
we always do these stupid things. So anyway, what do we need to be
Yeah.
afraid of?
Yeah. Well, not so. I'm going to say, by and large, not the disembodied. However, there are other entities which
Yeah.
a lot of people will not differentiate. There are, for instance, land spirits, and I'm pretty sure that Thor will be talking about that. Certainly, if you think about in Hawaii, the Menehune, or little people
Mhm.
of the Pacific, are very much, they don't care for pork for some reason. And there's stretches of road where you can't take pork on them or your car will die. And if you
Really?
you take the pork roast out of the car, and the car's
And
All
there's,
right,
And
she'll
they've obviously decided that discussing this is not a good thing.
she's got something
well,
going on that every time she gets to the heart of a bit.
yeah.
Lost you again.
yeah, back again. Anyway,
Well, the comments there that once you get to the heart of a subject, suddenly the spirits seem to shut off your internet connection.
well, okay, I mentioned the Menehune in Hawaii. I got
Right.
to Iceland and talk about the land spirits up there, where they have learned. In Iceland, they respect them enough so that if they're putting a road in, they check it with somebody who is sensitive to the trolls and say, okay, can we move this big rock? And sometimes they can get the big rock out of the way of the road. And sometimes they say, no, there's somebody living there. Let's curve around the rock because it will bother them, because they know that it's just not going to be worth the trouble to piss off the land spirits.
No.
And of course, if you, and those are general, I have land spirits that I've gotten to know on our property. We've talked about it in other things. House spirits, they do physical things. If the house spirit can carry water, bring things to us, repair the screens, rake, shovel, and other things that it has done, yes, they're capable of interacting with the physical world.
Yes.
Tick them off. Well, why do we not tick them off? Well, how do we not tick them? You treat them with respect. You, at very least, give them their bowl of porridge with butter and sugar or whatever. You acknowledge that they exist. You know, going back to what I was saying, shunning is not polite.
And there are different kind of people.
At different kinds of people, and there may very well be different types of elves or trolls or whatever, and you may tick off one and then have another one very fond of you. But you will always be better off if you are respectful in the first place. Thor, did you have something that you wanted to contribute on land spirits, or was it a different?
Yeah, when we first got here, there was a presence of something here on this property. And we kind of had to make peace with it in that regard. One of the first things we did was put up our own little wards, but we also thanked the land. We also, you know, gave offerings to the ravens and had, you know, we were nice to the plants. We didn't immediately go out and rip up all the mesquite that was around us. We were nice to the animals. And what we noticed was when we started to have a monsoon, the green started out from right where we were, and where our trailers are and stuff, and migrated outwards towards the outskirts of our property, kind of as a way of acknowledging that they like us. They notice that we're trying not to conform the property to our needs necessarily or our vision, but we're respecting the nature that's already here. And it shows. We were fortunate enough to have our well tapped into an underwater reservoir. And you know, that works. And so some of our neighbors are not so lucky in that regard. But this is where understanding the land, taking the time to understand and pay attention to what's around you, and like where the water flows are, where there are plants propagating, and what plants gravitate towards water. You pay attention to those things, you'll find that through time, you're kind of in sync with it. And, you know, we've done pretty good so far here, and no complaints there. But
taking that first year to see what goes on.
It took us what?
We're taking a year to see how the land is.
It's taken years to see how the land is and getting to know it and the animals that show up on it. We have little cute ground squirrels that go by. We have cottontails and jackrabbits. We have a pair of doves that have moved onto our property. And they don't mind. I get greeted every morning by a cottontail right at the trailer as I'm opening the door.
Yep.
Okay, it was really interesting that while you spoke, there seemed to be voices of spirits of some kind talking over you. And
That's either that or people in the background.
well, it seemed to be mimicking his.
Some of that too.
Could
I'll
also
take either
be
answer.
could also be feedback in his
Yeah, something was wrong there.
Possibly the hearing aid.
Yeah, there was
Yeah.
cowbell too.
Oh, okay.
Oh, a hearing aid. Okay, I
But
understand now.
And the sound is going through my Compilot right here. So
Oh,
that-
okay.
Oh, okay.
But
All
anyway,
right.
but yes, you could. Anytime you move someplace, it's good to be aware of. Just as one of the things that Raven Caldera, who is a authentic, if not professional, shaman does, is that he goes to check out houses, what people are doing, where they're looking to buy a new house, and he checks it out to make sure that everything that there's no unhappy spirits in there that are going to object to the people who move in. And so that is something that there may be unhappy spirits, and you may be able to sweeten them up by treating them with respect, or you maybe should just move on and find a different place.
Hmm.
which is why when we bought our house, the first thing I did was I did a basement to attic cleansing to get rid of any negative entities.
And
and
there's a
negative
whole lot
energy.
more on that one if you look on the YouTube channel and
Yep.
look in Star Wars in that episode.
You might want to
Um,
one day talk
but
about
yeah.
when you don't have ownership of the land or property.
Oh, us
Handle that.
eternal renters? Yeah.
Yeah, but that's for a future.
Yeah.
That would make a good one. Anyway, but we are, but Thor was talking to me before the show about there are spirits that you could talk about as in Norse they refer to them as the Jotuns or the Thurs, or
Mhm.
if you think about them in
Yep.
the Hellenic
The
pattern,
Titans.
the Titans, who are essentially, they're the gods that gave birth to the gods before. So the gods kind of like interacting with us, but the older gods, and I'm not talking Cthulhu, I'm talking about the Titans and the Jotun and the Thurs, are kind of forces of nature who humans have, having started to interact with the gods, looked at and said, this is another entity. Well, the thing is, they don't care about us. They don't want to interact with us. They really don't care. It's like we're as insects to them. And how many, they could just swat us because we were buzzing in their ear too loud. And we could be saying, oh, great entity, I want to become close to you. And so this, like, what was that? Get out. And
Go
they
away, you bother me.
so you have to be careful who you're approaching, because they aren't necessary, they might not want to have anything to do with you. Now, by and large, you'd have to go out of your way to approach them, but you might. I mean, let's face it, human beings have imaginations, and we come up with these things that we will do. And on the one end of the spectrum is my friend who thought her children didn't have any playmates locally, and so she invited the fairies to come live in the backyard so they could play with her children.
Oh, that comes under the uh-oh.
Yeah, that's definitely an uh-oh. And well, they got through it. But
She still has all her children, correct?
well, they grew up. But But
Well,
it's-
making sure that, you know, she had the same number that she had before she did that, and the ones that she now has are all human.
yeah, I believe they are. But I think when she was inviting in the spirits, what she was inviting in are these small, like
Oh,
little elemental
divas.
things that you know how intention drives so much magic. She was
Mhm.
picturing Tinkerbell, and that's the kind of thing she got. Now they are
Flower.
not safe because they don't have our sense of they don't have our sense of morality, and they will do things just they will poke us to see what we're going to do, and so that's not really safe. But there's a wonderful story in one of my books on Save Magic where Jenny Blaine, I believe, I think it was she, went to whether it was she knew someone. I think it was she knew someone. I don't think she was that dumb. Was trying to travel to all the 9 worlds, and you can do that if you enter a trance and you leave your body and go to another dimension. And she wanted to go to all the 9 worlds and learn the wisdom of the 9 worlds. And she went to, I forget whether it was Niflheim or one of the places where elder entities, in the 9 worlds, not somebody that humans usually interact with. And she found herself in a big cave, and trying to remember the name of the book. If I do, I'll put it up there. And basically she saw these entities in this cave, and we've never seen someone from Midgard before. What are you doing here? She said, I want to learn your magic. And they said, well, we can't teach it to you, but we can make you a part of it. And do you want that? And she said, sure. And they ate her. And she found herself, or her consciousness, in a pile of bones kicked in the corner of the cave. She doesn't know how long she was there, but then Loki came and said, boy, you got yourself in trouble, didn't you? And yes, would you like me to bring you back? And he said, oh, please. And then afterwards, she said, why did you do this for me? And he said, because you raised a horn for me. Same thing. Those who you treat with respect, those who you are interacting with in a positive way, are more likely to be nice to you.
Mm-hmm.
The inhabitants of this realm that she knew nothing about, how much didn't, we can't teach you, but we can make you a part of it.
Yep.
It comes down to not doing dumb stuff. And can you make people not be dumb? I don't think so. And yet that is the essence. We used to say, don't eat anything bigger than your head. Don't call up something you can't put down.
Don't put your elbow in your ear.
One of my friends actually stopped a bunch of people who were going to go out on Long Island to an old cemetery, and they'd found a copy of a Necronomicon, whether it's a paperback or something else.
No,
And
boy.
they wanted to try and do the ritual as close as they could in this graveyard on Halloween because cool. And they said, well, nothing's probably going to happen. And he says, yes, but what if it does? Do you have the part of the spell where if something comes up, you can put it back? And they said,
That
well,
is for
no,
you. There aren't
haven't gotten
any
that.
in the Necronomicon. There are some exorcisms, but they don't have any door shutting rituals.
No.
The
No.
closest
Be
thing
careful
you can
what you
do
ask
is
for.
the closest thing you can do when dealing with with somebody who's playing with the Necronomicon is the Jewish prayer for the dead seems to work pretty well. The Kaddish.
Okay.
But
Take the book away. Well, what he did was he logicked them. He says, if you're gonna, in case it comes up, can you put it down? And he did manage to talk them out of it.
Good.
I used to, when the paperback was around, buy any used copy I found and just burn them, because it's a tool that it gets abused. It is kind of designed to be abused.
it's
The
into its
paperback
20th
was made
printing, by the way. You can't buy them fast enough.
Yeah, but
Even if you save
anyway,
one
it's just
person.
That's
stupid
the-
people can do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's the problem I have with the Ouija board,
Mm.
because
Mhm.
I see my experience with the Ouija board is it just opens up a door, and unless you know how to figure out what walks through that door that you just opened up like a salon door, you can have things that linger that if you don't know what you're doing, you won't be able to send them back.
The party line telephone of the spirit world. You never know
Yeah.
who's on the line.
Yeah, and you never know who you got because they could
And
lie.
I am just old enough to remember party lines because I got my parents into trouble when I was about 3 playing on one.
Mhm.
Yeah, I remember
I
party
may have been
lines.
2. Yes, but you and I are in the same, as it were, age
Right.
category.
Fortunately for us, most of the people on the party line were relatives on the same street, but still,
You know,
Not
talking
in
about,
downtown New Haven, it wasn't.
talking about spirits in a household, when I was a kid, I think I was between like 3 or 4, maybe at most 5, but I was young. My brother and I shared a room, and I woke up in the middle of the night having to use the bathroom. And when I went to the bathroom and then came and opened up the door to leave the bathroom, now anybody who knows me knows I'm not a very tall person. When I was a kid, I was especially not a tall person. And I
I
opened the
think that's the
door.
definition of being a kid, among other things.
Well, yes, but I was a small kid even then. There was this entity that was 3/4 my height with a beard that was walking down the hallway and walked right into my room and disappeared. Barefoot. And like I said, 3/4 my height when I was a small young kid.
Mhm.
And,
Sounds like a house spirit,
yes, that's exactly what it was.
you know.
But
I
things
should
that
have gave it
you,
a sock.
but without having a spirit, without having a, without being able, having a folklore surrounding you, you didn't know how to interact with it. You didn't have any of the ground rules, and the ground
No
rules
context.
are so important. Yeah.
I just watched it walk down the hallway and disappear. I didn't interact with it. I didn't even think anything twice of it. Now that I'm an adult, I'm like going, I might have met a house spirit.
Mhm.
But
Very much
if you,
so.
most people don't react well to seeing something that then disappears. Someone that can't have gotten out of a closed room.
Yeah.
So
well, that's why we're not most people.
Yeah.
it's true.
If we were most people, we would not be doing this right now.
Well, no, I mean, what the hell? What are we talking about here? I mean, we all rejoice in the fact that we're not most people.
Yes.
Mhm.
Because you talk
And that we
about
talk to
stupidity.
somebody about the things we saw that I don't want, and nobody thinks we're crazy. It's like, yeah,
Right,
we saw,
but
we
I
don't know what it was, but we will now speculate.
But I
Go on,
remember
Bill.
Albert Einstein once said, "Genius has its limits. Stupidity is not thusly limited." And well, one of mine is if somebody does something really brainless, I may look at them and say, "Are you that stupid naturally, or did you have to take special training?"
Special training from their
So getting
One of my
Getting-
favorite sayings is ignorance may be bliss, but ignorance is surely not harmless.
true.
That's absolutely true. Although I've more than once said, well, if ignorance is bliss, so and so is the happiest bastard on the planet. But
Well,
but
I think
To
the
get
source of
into-
that is that you may not, that you don't know what you might be worried about. We, another type of entity that you can get in trouble with is fairies or fae, and this is something I was kind of hoping Morgan Damon would come tonight. She said she would if she could, and she hasn't. So I was kind of putting that off to the end, hoping she would come in and talk about it, because if there are certain rules, and if you study folklore, you'll learn those rules. It helps you to know not to do the right thing. But I'm eclectic. I want to talk to the people who are, the rules are different. We're not a monoculture. The Fae don't have a monoculture.
There are
They, there are many
tribes and
kinds.
clans and nations, and
Mhm.
not everything is British Isles oriented. Titania and Oberon, or
Right.
Gwynap Nud and his crew, and I don't know who runs the equivalent in Scotland, or the Seelie and Unseelie courts, which
Right.
it's just like the Seelie are not the Alfar.
No,
Two different. I think in terms of those, we're looking at two different subspecies.
Mm-hmm.
To suddenly be more anthropological than metaphysical, or two different nations. Most of the time, I don't think they really get along, and that may have something to do with invasions and
right.
hitchhikers and
I've always had this sense that they were divided up just as humans are. They have ideological divisions, political divisions. I'm not entirely certain how geographic divisions affect them, but it's obvious that there are a bunch of them. Well, it's like, it kind of reminds me, somebody once said about the United States, we don't have 50 states here, we have 50 countries here. And,
pretty much.
I think that as there's a lot to be said for any group like the Fae, or you could pick just about anybody and find that there are at least 3 factions that hate each other.
Mhm. It's like when the Europeans came to the New World and did things like buy the island of Manhattan from a bunch of natives who were the tribe next over from Manhattan. They were perfectly willing
To sell somebody else's property.
Yes. Well, yeah.
Now, when Chipicon comes back from her Ethernet limbo, she said something got me tweaking about a psychological term, free-floating anxiety. This is when you are anxious or worried about something, but damned if you have an idea what it is. Now, I don't know how this ties into any of the entities that you guys collectively know, that there are there some that produce that kind of thing, as opposed to, oh God, I'm going to lose the house tomorrow, but something horrible is going to happen. And, is that something to be afraid of?
Well, not
Signal
necessarily.
credit.
If you use it,
save your life.
if you use it as a warning and you're then careful, then it's not necessarily a bad thing. As far as floating anxieties, I've actually run into a couple, or at least one of them.
As an entity?
Well, yes, this is something about, God, it must have been 10, maybe even as much as 15 years ago. They were holding 12th night in Ridgefield, Connecticut, in the middle school there. Now, the middle school is built on the grounds of the old Fairfield Hills Hospital, which was one of the old snake pit style mental.
Oh boy.
Yes. And because 12th night has changed to order meeting, lunch, order meeting, court, nobody was in the merchant area buying or getting readings or doing anything. So I was, basically I pulled one of my malas off and I started doing what I do when I'm bored. I was basically telling my beads, as it were. And for once, not having Kathy next to me to poke me in the ribs and say, Sean, you're getting too loud. I was,
Okay.
3/4 of the way into a light trance when I noticed an odor, because I know when I'm going down, my senses get very, very acute. And what I smelled garbage. We're not just talking, a little bit of bad. This was, landfill in mid-August at high noon type of
With
odor.
Well,
slaughterhouse
this
waste.
is the non-cardboard dumpster at your average grocery store, where all
Bingo.
the rotten food goes.
Yeah.
And
Bingo.
as George Carlin
moved-
once said, you could knock a buzzard off a shit wagon with that.
Basically, it moved past me, going one way side to the other. Then it moved back. Then it moved back again in the other direction, back where it was originally heading for. And I came back up after a while, and the first thing I did is I asked the other, has somebody been around carrying bags of garbage? And no. There is definitely something that lives in that middle school, by the way.
I remember this story now from
Yeah.
another episode.
Yeah, when we're dealing with negative entities. Yeah, and it's an example of, this is something, first and foremost, building a middle school on the grounds of Fairfield Hills Hospital is perhaps the stupidest thing I could ever think of.
Well, the most vulnerable population put
And
on
of course,
top.
no thought to cleansing the ground or anything. Or
Right.
I think I would need an awful lot of war water and an awful lot of Four Thieves vinegar.
Yeah.
And probably enough sulfur and wormwood to
Poison ground forever.
aside from the fact that the administration, no, you burn it, would probably not let me do it. I mean, I come in there and say, hi, you've got something living here that is feeding off your students and making them even more unhappy and angst driven and prone to sudden spontaneous acts of negative behavior, because it feeds on them.
Right.
And these things are like amoebas. When they get to a certain point, they split and you get 2. And then the 2 becomes 4, and and this wasn't even built on top of any of the old buildings. This was just built on the grounds. You couldn't pay me to go into one of those buildings. Though I know people who, we're just going to go there tonight. The moon is full. It's like, oh my gods.
Let's have some spooky fun.
Yeah, there's a similar thing in New London where the Three Rivers Hospital, which is the eastern end of the state's answer to Fairfield Hills, is apparently being turned into a condominium. Yeah. Step 1.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder if this is an organized plan to put high-rise dense housing and educational facilities on basically Sith cemeteries. And
or as I tend to refer to them, metaphysical toxic sites.
right, and exposing the largest percentage of the American population at vulnerable points to this contamination in the hope they'll turn into Donald Trump. So,
Well,
if it is, it's succeeding, judging by
that's what bothers me.
over the last year.
Yeah.
well,
And again,
across the street from where we lived in Maryland, it was basically the former site of a munitions manufacture plant from World War One and World War Two. And they
Ooh,
were
there must-
wanting to put a housing development on that land, and they were finding shell casings, and they were finding other black powder bunkers underground and stuff like this.
Mhm.
Before we moved there, but I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Well, I think
Yeah.
about that in terms of us looking at some of these senior housing developments. And I suddenly realized we've looked at a couple that were converted schools. And, what were the schools built on?
We
And
don't know.
we have no idea. At
Right.
least as far as we know, we have not investigated anything built on undisclosed graves or American Indian burial grounds.
that
Right.
they know of.
I can guarantee you that all of it is on Native American land because the city of Syracuse is actually leased from the local tribes. The
The
Onondaga.
Onondaga Nation for one, yeah.
Yeah.
But so yeah, you start to wonder, and of course, most of the first peoples had no concept of land ownership. They
Right.
understood stewardship. But the idea that someone would pay you for land was to some of them a laughable concept.
Yeah.
And you want to give us money for something that doesn't exist? Okay, I'll take it.
Anyway.
To
Anyway.
get back to the Star Wars comments about seeing entities that seem to feed off the humans. My wife and I had that same impression about Tombstone, Arizona, where it seemed
Oh,
that
that's
the
interesting.
city itself feeds off
Yeah.
the tourists.
Was that not the town referred to as Hell with the Hinges Off?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I've known friends. I've had friends who lived there, and never heard anything of that type from them. Some of them own property, like the Tombstone Jail and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Well,
there's
that's-
definitely.
I believe
what-
Deadwood has the same problem,
Yeah.
up further north.
Well, Arizona has a lot of problems in general, but this is kind of specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for example, San Pedro River, they've turned that area into a little park, but that was sacred land to the Native Americans. And then in New Mexico, there's the sauna. Well, no, not sauna. It's what are they called? Hot springs in New Mexico.
Oh,
And that was very, very sacred to the Chiricahua and the Apache.
Okay,
And
that would be the
they
other
turned that
side of the
into-
state from where I lived.
Yeah. And that it doesn't belong to the Native Americans anymore. They've taken it from them. Fort Bowie, that in Arizona, that was a sacred area to the Native Americans. It was one of their travel routes, and it had a natural spring there, and we took that from them.
we took everything
Oh,
from them.
it's kind of like going through Europe. You want to find the old sacred sites? Look for the cathedral. They
Yes.
dropped
Yeah,
they
they're-
tended to drop a cathedral on top of it.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. And talking about that, the historical entity that does world preservation or world preservation sites, they're talking about yanking the Stonehenge off that list because they're trying to build a tunnel through there.
Yeah, I
Ooh,
saw
David
that.
just showed up. David just showed up.
All right.
Oh, that
But-
just from the point of view of turning the archaeological record around that thing into a can of corned beef hash.
Yeah, well, it has been blocked. I read recently.
Yeah.
We have Raven has shown up, and yay. And I would like
Oh,
so I would like to ask him, one of the things we were talking about earlier in the hour was opening like Ouija boards and opening doors that you don't know how to shut. And I know that you have dealt with doors that got left open after a ritual.
Mhm.
And
It's open. I get stuck.
Many times, doors. I've also cleaned up after other people's rituals, and I've also done really, really intense rituals. We did a really hugely intense ritual at a gathering once, which was a reenacting of the Descent of Inanna, and it was amazing, and it was huge. And there was this one sort of metal structure of metal poles that we used as the sort of gate to the underworld because we had it there. We sort of took the hanging bits off of it and used it, and apparently we opened the gate to the underworld. And afterwards, everyone in the ritual was just completely blown. We were just all exhausted, and we sort of left all the ritual stuff there and closed up the building. It was the Bat Barn at Ramblewood for people who've been to Ramblewood, and came back the next day. And I went in and I said, oh no, that metal structure there that we borrowed is still the door to the underworld.
Oh,
Oops.
And so I grabbed a couple of the people who had been in the ritual, and we had to do a ritual and make an offering to close it. You know, we quickly checked to see, it was pretty clear, like, what do we need to do to close offering? Okay, well, let's do it. And that was like fortunately, there was nothing scheduled in the morning. So nobody came in. And that was why we knew we could leave stuff, because there was overnight, because there was nothing scheduled in the morning. But thank goodness, there was nothing scheduled in the morning, and that we came back to clean it up and noticed that it wasn't just stuff we needed to clean up. It wasn't just the props. It was also the door. So I mean that happened.
Now, did anything come through the gate while it was open? Were there any unwanted visitors?
okay.
All right, well, that's good.
No, because it was made to be only when we opened it, it was very much only these people can pass the door.
Good.
Oh, okay.
And yeah. And we
Otherwise,
also,
that might have gotten much too exciting.
yes, we also, however, we had made offerings before the ritual to every single deity invoked in the ritual, all of them, and asked, please let this go well. Please we know this is going to be a heavy thing. We realize some people, rituals that have to do with underworlds often bring up stuff for people, and we know it's going to be heavy. Some people may have issues. Please let it go as well as possible. And that included Erish Kigal, who's really in charge.
Yeah.
She was the one who was in charge of that door, and it was her we made the second offering. And so she did not send anything through, but we could sort of tell she was tapping her fingers like, okay, I've held this door open all night, not let anything through it. Are you going to give me something?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Immediately, ma'am.
Yeah, I would too.
This
And I
is
gather
when
she
a
was
large plate
satisfied.
of lamb might be appropriate.
Now, was she satisfied with everything? You're still here.
Yes, she was. She was. She was satisfied. Somebody even gave their blood. Someone volunteered.
Oh, okay. Well,
And,
that's
and,
sincere.
someone and we made offerings to her, and we ceremonially closed the door, and she was satisfied. But that was a matter of, what we should have done is we should have thought ahead that A, this might happen, and that B, we all might be completely wiped out. That those of us running this thing might be completely wiped out. And so we should have thought ahead, what happens if we don't have the energy to close the door, and had a separate team whose job it was to come in, make offerings to Erish Kigal and close that door. That's, we're right to do it again. Crew. That's what I would have done.
Yeah. And
Oh, well.
this is what this falls into the large category of what goes wrong if you don't believe in what you're doing. If you don't think magic works, or you're going to give it we give it a shot. What's going to happen? Probably nothing, because we don't know what we're doing. Probably, magic isn't really real. That's where people get in trouble a lot.
Suddenly,
if you
I
And
suddenly had this image of Tommy Lee Jones and Harrison Ford from Fugitive, but the conversation goes, "I don't believe in you. I don't care." And
Mhm.
I don't believe in you. I haven't watched it.
I don't believe you. And the response is, "I don't care," because disbelief is supposed to be a dispeller.
I think
So
people also
Not
get in,
always.
I think people also get in trouble when they go into a working without enough information about it, like having never asked other people what they did, or what
Mhm.
problems might come up, or they go into it not understanding that it might take skills or skill levels that they do not have.
right.
When they overestimate their skills, or they don't know that there are certain things they really ought to know how to do in order to manage this. And I think the only answer to that is education, education, education. Is just
Oh, absolutely, because so many people look at magic or any manipulation of energy as something vague and undefined. And it isn't. It's fairly precise. And if you read any of Randall Garrett's Lord Darcy books, we have a magic system where thaumaturgy is a science. You go to university to learn it. And if we had something like that in our world, maybe fewer people would jump into the pit like that.
Yeah, we have. There are two kinds. I mean, people talk a whole lot about how intent drives a lot of magic, and yes, it does. But there's also what they called in the Dresden Files vending machine magic. If you use the right components and you do the right things with them, the magic happens.
Yeah. I'm finally listening to the first one. She's gone again.
Yeah, she's gone again. Vending machine magic.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm
I'll
finally
have a
listening to the
D1 and a
first of the Dresden
D22.
Files books, and I'm quite. I find the universe they created quite interesting.
Think
You were
in terms of
first.
an old-fashioned sea captain's medicine chest, where you had the numbered bottles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did lose you again, Chip.
Okay.
I think there's, it depends. I think as soon as you get any entities involved, no matter who they are, no matter what they are, whenever entities get involved, any semblance of vending machine goes out the window. It is automatically a whole bunch of chaos variables that are thrown into the mix. And I think a lot of, I think the worst stuff that I've ever seen has been because people did not understand how to deal with the entities that they were attempting to deal with, or entities inserted themselves that people did not expect to deal with, or they thought that it would be fun to open. I've had to go around and close a lot of gates with people that a lot of young people opened because they wanted to bring more magic into the world. And what they managed to do was bring more entities into the world who maybe shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
I must admit, in my younger
Something
days,
is walking by.
I was
and
probably
he's not
guilty of that myself. But, you know.
I am the hazmat team.
Uh,
Yeah, it sounds
Likewise.
like it. I can just see you in your metaphysical bunny suit. And
Yes, I had a friend who drew a cartoon of for the shamanic guild that I run of a bunch of us in bunny suits with strange sigils painted on them, holding like rattles and things, and sort of dancing around a bug-eyed horror on someone's lawn, you know.
oh, geez. And you mentioned sigils, and all of a sudden, all I think about the biological, radiological, and chemical warfare signals. Okay, we have now all the metaphysical signals for malevolent entities. We got to invent iconography here so we can all wear a bunny suit with all this stuff on.
Yeah, paint runes on my bunny suit. Yeah.
Or
We want
with
I'll talk
certain
to Jen about
certain-
that.
effects have happened upon it, and we put stickers on the wall to indicate it's dangerous spot.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
when next we have a physical changing times, I will have to introduce people to my staff because he's very definitely
Hmm.
my version of my entity weapon.
Mm.
Okay.
He gets to eat
All
what
right,
he
that
kills.
would be cool.
I do think we have more help. We are better off when we, as Raven said, they are, when you bring in an entity, well, of course, they're an unknown. They could change their mind in the middle.
Yeah.
Huh?
Well, they're
and-
individuals.
And
They're
I
people.
think, so the more we know about them, the better off we are.
Hmm.
If we know, I mean, how many people in the United States right now think that Loki is Tom Hiddleston?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I
He
think,
thinks that's hilarious, by the way. He just thinks it's funny.
Yeah.
Loki,
Yeah.
well, Tom Hiddleston is Loki. We just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
But if there was ever an icon that represented Loki, but in fact, well,
You know,
the
Given-
first season of Loki was not the mythological Loki, who was much scarier than that.
Yeah.
yeah.
and I'm going back to the what this was about. Are there things out there you should be scared of? Yes, there are.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
frankly, there are things out there that are bigger than you, who could step on you
Mhm.
intentionally or unintentionally. And your best safety is knowing more about them, knowing
Hmm.
where you're
Knowledge-
going. If you,
Knowledge is
I can't
power.
tell you,
Yeah.
I have to whine. This is a rant I do a lot, which is so often there are, okay, we're going to go on a guided meditation and they take you through a whole cavern, a well or whatever. And suddenly you're on the other side, you're in a place, and then there's always a place that is not a place and a time that is not a time. Where you go someplace, let's go astral traveling and seeing what we want. But damn it, guys, this is not, you can't go joyriding into the land of the Alfar. You can't go joyriding into
Hmm.
other worlds, and you're being an ugly, not the ugly American, but you're being an American tourist. This
Yes.
is not a freaking Disneyland ride. It's not safe, and
You
you
can't
are.
just go without serious intent and understanding.
And
I
then
believe
you,
Right.
we're going to be having a panel
They're not
discussing
there
that at
for
Changing
your-
Times.
they're not there for your amusement. And
Oh.
okay, end of rant. Sorry,
No
but
problem.
it
Right.
just bugs me.
Kind of reminded me of the trailer for Jungle Cruise. Everything out there can kill you and will. And it's kind of strange and interesting, but mindfulness is a big thing too. Because if you are not wrapped up in your own mind and you are actually aware of everything around you,
Mhm.
you can detect things that might be not nice to you.
Hmm.
And you can only do that from a neutral perspective. You can't do it from a paranoid perspective. And you have to actually, it's the Zen ideal of aware of everything, reacting to nothing. And the being aware of everything is a lot of work.
I
But I
think go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that, and that's basically it, because this is something I've been working on for 25 years.
Something that
And
Well,
yeah.
an
What-
interesting.
yeah.
something that I see typically I talk to people who don't believe in this, but I think there's a sort of in-between belief thing where people believe, but they don't believe it counts. It's like, I believe this is real, but I don't believe it counts in the same way that my ordinary physical life counts. For example,
Oh,
if
that's
you were going to
interesting.
visit someone in another country, but you didn't necessarily know where they lived, would you get a one-way ticket to that other country, fly there without having contacted them ahead of time, and wander around their neighborhood, including the the crappy parts of their neighborhood, trying to talk randomly to people sitting on stoops, and saying things like, "Are you my spirit animal?" and "Are you my spirit guide?" and "Do you know where Joe lives?" and all this sort of thing. And then you show up on Joe's doorstep, and Joe says, "Who the fuck are you?" Would you do that? No. You would call ahead. You would contact. Maybe you would find someone who lived there who knew Joe, who could pass this on and make arrangements. You would plan your trip. But because it's real but not real, because it's real enough to do, but it's not real enough to treat like real life, they don't do the simple, easy courtesies, the sort of common sense courtesies that you would do if you were trying to visit someone here. And that's the whole point of having spirit allies, is it's having friends who can get you places. And I think that really, that's an attitude that it's hard to shift, like that real but not real. Oh yes, I believe it's real. Then why don't you treat it like you would, someone like a human being? Well, they're different.
Well,
That's
why
different.
don't you
It's
treat
not
it
the same.
like it's real?
It's a lot more like that than you think. Okay, I'll shut
Well,
up
that's an
now.
interesting perspective, and I think you're absolutely right there, Raven, because there are a lot of people who say, "Oh yeah, that's real," but they treat it like it's a cartoon character. So, and it's something to watch out for, all of us to watch out for in ourselves.
Well, if I may say, having been a military brat that lived overseas, it's a common problem. I've seen people go overseas and they just have no concept of trying to understand the other culture that they've walked into. It's like a tourist bus that just goes wherever it wants and just piles out of the bus, regardless of where they're at, not even caring about where they're at. And it can stir up the locals, so to speak. Such thing happened when a tourist group went to an area of Japan and decided they wanted to go see Nagasaki, where the bomb dropped. And it was a bunch of American tourists. Well, some of those areas around there are very, very touchy when it comes to the local Japanese, and they were not happy. They turned that bus around in droves.
Oh, and by the way, do you know where Joe lives? Raven caught it.
Yep.
Anyway.
Well, I mean, I've seen, just to make that comparison, I've seen YouTube videos of Western tourists who go with their camera to some third world country and decide they want to see this sort of interesting person, and they're like chasing people randomly around on the street with their cameras. And I feel so ashamed for, being a white Westerner, just watching that. And they do the same thing. They do the same thing with everyone is my entertainment. Everyone, is here to help me. It exists to advise or entertain or enlighten or whatever me. It's that incredibly selfish, self-centered thing. And they take that to spirit worlds. They take that to dealing with this stuff, that same attitude. And I mean, I just cringe when I see videos like that. Oh God.
The only thing I can think of is that if I ever found myself in a similar situation and I managed to convince the locals that I was more sincere because I had made an effort to speak the language, that I knew where I was and respected some local customs, that I might get more of a positive response because of all the other idiots.
Yeah.
Once you get past their trust issues, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. Once they learn to trust you and they realize you're an okay person, well, first of all, is this marvel of this Western white guy who isn't an asshole. And it's such an uncommon phenomenon. So,
Yeah.
But the problem is where one person could go into, say, an other world or visiting or dealing with some other entities, where one person could go that if they were polite and did all the right things and made previous arrangements and made alliances there and made offerings and the whole thing, they could go and it would be all right and they could come back. Somebody who barges in is often considered fair game. You know,
Yeah.
it's like go into, you know, the combat zone and going up to somebody sitting on a doorstep and saying, will you please teach me the wisdom? And yeah, they're going to knock you over the head and take your wallet.
Well, you'd be smarter.
Mhm.
well, yeah, but that's why you make these studies at a time so that you realize that the sound of gunfire is not an indication of a good neighborhood. So,
I'm gonna say again, now you've probably heard it before, the story of the Gardnerians who wanted wisdom, and so they decided they were going to call up Athena, and they successfully called Athena into the high priestess with a drawing down, and Athena looked at them and she looked at herself and she said, "Why am I naked?"
Oh.
Did
oops.
do their research. You got to do your research, and that is
Yeah.
that whether you are going to deal with a fae and have to, you know, okay, are these the fae where you never refuse their hospitality, or is these the fae where you never eat anything there? Are these the fae who are bound to tell the truth and you just have to listen very carefully to the words that they're using, because they're probably going to be worse than lawyers? Or, you know, you got to learn the ground rules, and I think folklore helps with that.
Yeah, there's a story that's been published in a book of a sort of sociology book that Sayed Khanna wrote about how when she was young, when she was first starting this work, she did a journey to she had read about these two sort of giantess goddesses who lived in the woods, and you know, two magical old crone goddesses kind of thing, and she decided she was going to go journey there, and she journeyed to their house, and she actually made it there to their world and to their house, and said, "I want you to teach me your wisdom." Just like stand at the doorstep and demand to be taught wisdom. And they said, well, we some of our wisdom is stuff that we can't really teach you until we make you a part of it. And she said, all right,
Oh, we're
you
back
can
to
be part
that
of your
thing.
wisdom. And they jumped on her and tore her apart and ate her astrally. and
Well, that's
ate her down to bones, and then she lives laying there like still stuck in the trance, bones on the floor, and Loki came in and reassembled her and said, that was stupid, now go back to where you came from, and sent her home. And so now she has to like pour for him regularly, but that it's like she tells that as a story of like, look, this is stupid, and they had every right to do that to me because I was being an idiot. I was encroaching on their territory and demanding things of them. Somebody has just put it out there. Yes, I actually talked to her and heard the story from her, but somebody put out the reference. But yeah, I've talked to her. I know who she is.
well, obviously we're having a good time because it's 25 after 9, I noticed.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to sign off soon because I gotta eat so that I can.
Chipicon, you are muted.
Yeah, I just wanted to say out loud in case somebody's listening on the YouTube. 9 Worlds of Sade Magic, Ecstasy and Neo-Shamanism in North European Paganism by Jenny Blaine. That it's a very cool book. So because you know the YouTube part doesn't get the chat room. So,
That's true.
Oh,
Yeah.
so we got to say
Anyways,
these things.
probably thank everybody. Is there anybody who has something else they feel is really important? Because we have gone over time, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
was a great discussion. It was wonderful. I enjoyed it. Please, this is what our panels are like, which is why we usually put a block of time after a panel so that people can keep talking. Changing Times, Changing Worlds this year is going to be November 8th through 14th. Check out the website and tell your friends about it. Registration is now open. Okay, thanks everybody. So glad you're,
Bye.
no, it's not. That